Right. So, what we discussed in the previous session about requirement lifecycle management. As part of requirement lifecycle management, even I discussed about tracing of requirements. In context to tracing of requirements, I have explained you about use cases, right? So, because connect between use cases and test cases is what being a business analyst we have to see. So, in this regard, how to write use cases we have discussed. Now, in today's session, we are going to discuss about how to maintain requirements, because maintaining of requirements, which is part of requirements communication, means if you want to communicate requirements with people, it is always important for us to communicate requirements with people in regular intervals. So, to communicate requirements, as I told you earlier, when we follow the traditional practices of application development, we prepare different documents, something like BRD, SRS, etc. So if we are preparing in agile environment, we prepare in spite of preparing documents and all, we do uh, what we call, we write user stories and all everything in Jira. That's what the communication of requirements we do. Now, in today's session, I'm going to explain you how and what business requirements document is, and how should it looks like, and what information we want to update in this. Okay, that's what in today's session we are discussing. So this is what generally the document relating to business requirements document. You can see here, this is a document which is called BRD. BRD stands for business requirements document. Means whatever the business requirements we want to develop. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So whenever we are preparing business requirements document, business requirements majorly focusing on the business aspects of the project. Either it can be the business problem, either it can be the solution, impacts, at the same time, whatever the critical success factors, all these things we need to mention. But whatever the document I am showing you, this is a template, which normally in industry to communicate requirements and all to prepare BRD. This is what generally the template we follow. But this template may slightly vary to organization because base level information, what is that we need to write under requirements documents remains constant. That never changes, right? So that remains as it is. So, but what is different? The difference is that whenever we are working on this requirements document, it is essentially important for us to understand what kind of requirement document do we need to prepare and how this has to be elevated, right? So because organization to organization, there may be having some slight modifications, but otherwise remaining document business requirements documents remains intact like this. So here we need to write down the project name first. First of all, I'll explain you from the beginning so that you'll be understood well, right? Here we need to write down the project name. So what is our project name? Our project name itself is called a kite, right? So this is a name for the product, what we have taken. Okay, because ours is cloud-based point of sale system. This cloud-based point of sale system product name, yeah. So this account name is called as cloud-based POS system. This is what generally the name of the product, which is called cloud-based point of sale system. Right. So here we need to mention the department name, right? So department name, normally it is an IT department. This is where documents are being prepared here. So this is business requirements document. Here we need to mention the status. Status means there are two things. One is about draft, second is published. Normally draft document will be prepared first. So once, because why draft document? Because if there are any changes to be made into the existing application, we have to update the draft document first. So once we have got all the information, once we have mentioned all these, then we go to the published one. Okay, that is the difference. Whenever we are working on the status, initially this document will be draft initially. So any changes and all everything we do, once the changes was made, that will be considered as a published document, right? That's the difference one. So first is draft document. After that, the draft document will be published. So next year we need to mention the version. Version means, let's say this is the project first of its kind we are doing, cloud-based POS. So hence this is version 1. In future, whatever the changes are we making in the existing cloud-based point of sale system, that will be comes under 2, 3, 4, and so on. So as of now, this is 0.1, right? Or else I can say version 1 it was. Now prepared by whom? Normally business analyst team will be prepared here. So prepared by the business analyst. That's what generally we need to mention. Whoever are the people involving in the business analyst role, right? So either it can be one person or it can be two, it can be three, right? Whoever are there as a business analyst. So we have to mention that, mention the time, mention the names and etc. All these in the prepared here. Next, date created means when this BRD document is prepared. So when this we have created, so the date we have to mention. At the same time, last revise means, let's say whenever the document we create, there are possibilities sometimes we require to do some revision. So depends on the need and all everything, that revision has to be made subsequently. So this is where generally date last received is what generally mentioned here. This is where generally date created followed by date last received, etc. All that. Next, this is about the project charter. Okay, leave it. Now here, this is where generally document revision history. Document revision history means whenever we are working on the project, there are some changes we might require to make in future. Let's say, for example, we have made some new features or functionalities are added, or some other changes we have made in the existing project. Subsequently, whenever there are some changes we have made, all these changes has to be updated under the document revision history. This is what generally document revision history stands for. Initially, whenever we start the project, we don't do the revisions and all. But once the document we start working on it, whenever there are any changes happens and all that, so subsequently revision details, everything will be mentioned over here. This is where generally document revision history come into picture, means version 1. For example, now we are working on 1.2, right? So in future, we may be going for second version of this project, which is called 3.2, right? After that, we may be going 3.2. Right, so minor differences or major differences, right? So when we have made the changes, right? Who has requested? So what is being revised? For example, if there are any changes we have made, what kind of changes? That change description has to be mentioned over here. So this is where generally document revision history is being used for. So once the document revision history is done, the next is glossary of terms. Glossary of terms means terminologies. Let's say, for example, we have used a word called AKITE. What is AKITE stands for? Cloud-based point of sale system. Right, so this is what generally AKITE stands for. Means product name is called AKITE. Okay. Now, for example, we have used a word called Azure. What is Azure? It's a cloud platform. Right, so this is how whatever the terminologies which is relating to that particular project, because terminologies varies depends on the domain we choose it. So this is a retail domain we have taken, right? So it can be banking, it can be healthcare, it can be insurance. So whatever the terminologies and jargons we use, so those terminologies and jargons we have to be mentioned here. This is where generally terms and acronyms and all everything come into picture. Next, once the terminologies and acronyms and all everything, here we need to write down the purpose. Purpose of preparing this document. For what purpose we are preparing this document? On a high level note, we need to explain, because here you see, here we write the purpose of preparing this document as well as cloud-based solution, right? So ours is a cloud-based application. Cloud-based point of sale system is what we are doing. So write down the purpose of what exactly the project is all about and what is the purpose behind preparing this business requirements document, because business requirements document majorly we prepare to explain the business functionalities of the project. That's where generally the purpose will be mentioned. So in this purpose, we have to mention the business related information, whatever the business related information, whatever the purpose behind developing this application. So that information we have to be updated. This is where generally purpose come into picture. Next, audience. Audience means people who are involving in the project, right? It can be project team members, it can be project sponsor, right? It can be a business owner, it can be a technical owner, it can be of any other stakeholders do we see, right? So all these details, people, because people who are involving in the project, those people are called as audience. Those details has to be mentioned under the audience here. Next, criteria. Criteria means medium projects per sizing matrix, keep it as it is. Timing. For example, timelines means assume that the project will be taken 6 months for us to complete. For example, right? Let's say project management team has decided that project to complete with, it is taking 6 months time. Assume that, for example. So we have to mention the duration here, right? How much time will it be taken for us to complete? So the timing we need to mention. This is where generally this is something essentially required. So once the timing is done, the next is about, here you need to write down the project information. Like you need to mention about the project manager name. So whoever is the manager for the project, we need to mention the project sponsor details. At the same time, we need to mention about the business owner, IT owner, right? So all this information we have to update. At the same time, we need to write down the description of the project. Description of the project means what exactly this project is, right? For example, cloud-based point of sale system is an application which will be used by the retailers at the time of billing. At the time of billing, right? So the major goal is to reduce operational difficulties while using that, while perform billing at regular as well as peak times during working day or during weekday and weekends. Okay, this is how generally we need to write, right? So this is how generally we have to write on here, right? So you can see, right? So this is how generally the project description we need to write. So this is how generally the description and all everything we will be writing here. So once the description of the project, here we need to write down the purpose, objectives and goals. If you remember, there are some assignments I have given earlier, couple of assignments I have given to you. So whatever the business purpose objectives which we have identified, so that information has to be updated under the business purpose objectives, goals, all that. So next is problem opportunity statement. Problem opportunity statement means what problem we have identified. What was the problem in the case study? What was the problem in the case study? Anyone? What problems we have identified?
System performance and data centralization.
Your voice is very slow. Can you please bit it out, please?
The problem is system performance and data centralization.
Absolutely, right? So system performance and data centralization. right? So system performance and data centralization are the problems. What is getting affected? Delay in billing, right? So delay in billing is what generally the effect is. Because of that, what is getting affected? Decline in sales. This is long term. Effect is immediate, impact is long term. So what solution are we going to provide? Developing a cloud-based point of sale system is what generally the solution are we going to develop, right? So this is based on the information, whatever we have identified so far. This is the information, whatever we have, whatever the research we have made earlier, based on the complete information, what we have identified, etc., all that. End of the day, problem opportunity statement affects, impacts, whatever the successful solution, everything has to be mentioned under the problem opportunity statement, right? So this is what it was. Next here, we need to write down in scope and out scope. If you remember, I told you, right? In scope, nothing but whatever is in our control. What is in our control? Let's say that team size in our control. So how technically our employees are, our team members are. This is in our control. So approach of developing an application, like whatever the SDLC approach or a model are we going to use, that is under our control. So all these things are in our control. This is where we call it as inclusion stands for. Now, what is meant by exclusion? Exclusion which is not in our control. Let's say that, for example, if there is any deviation in requirements was taken place. Let's say, for example, project we have started. In between, customer has changed some requirements for some reason, whatever the reason. So he has changed it. What will happen now? Whatever the scope we have identified the project will be deviated. This is where generally out of scope stands for, because when there is a deviation of the goal which is identified and which was done, automatically this will impact on the project, whatever the project are we working on. So automatically it will be impacting on the project. That's what we have to be seen with. That is what we need to understand whenever we are working on the project, right? So whenever we are working on the project, it is essentially important for us to understand about the inclusions here. So what are the inclusions do we have and all everything that we need to be updated here. So not only inclusions, we need to understand the exclusions, right? So exclusions means what are the difficulties we are being faced in this area, and what kind of elements to be taken into consideration, what are the aspects to be focused more of. All these things are comes under the exclusions part. So inclusions are different, exclusions are different, right? So these are the two basic things we need to be considered here. Next, after that, key assumptions. What are the key assumptions we need to consider? Assumptions that assume that, for example, key assumption. Let's say that I'll write down the points. Okay. What are the assumptions? Assume that people, end users, or else I can write down end users are new to use of cloud services. Okay. First point. Second, application must be scalable as this can be used in multiple stores. This can be used in multiple stores by the client at a time. Okay, for example, different stores we have different applications, different cloud-based credentials, because systems we don't require to change. But whatever the login IDs and all everything will be taken. How many user licenses we want? Those many user licenses will be taken by the customer. Let's say, for example, customer is having 4 retail store. They will be taking user licenses and all everything in 4. Okay. If it is only one, it may be one. Let's say in that particular store, they require 2 different areas. For example, if the store is very big, billing counter won't be 1, right? It can be 2 or it can be 3, it can be 4 even. So how many user licenses they want? Those many user licenses customer can take up, right? So these are the key assumptions we need to keep. Okay, that's what the point here need to be mentioned here. Next, dependencies. What is meant by dependency here? Depending application, I mean cloud-based point of sale system. Okay, application performance depending on the speed of broadband connectivity. Okay, broadband connectivity. Let's say, for example, we have developed an application, we have given this to the customer. Assume that customer is finding difficulty in broadband connection. For example, their internet connection is not good, right? So how well and how gently we have developed the cloud-based application, that doesn't have any value because the internet speed was not so good. Automatically, that will be impacting on the performance of the application, right? This can be. Next, project dependency. Make sure inventory management system must be inventory management system. మేడం నేను క్లాస్లో ఉన్నానండి, నేను 9 o'clock వస్తాను. నేను క్లాస్ right. So inventory management system must be, make sure inventory management must be accurate. So that when we do billing, product details followed by the unit price will be accurate. Okay, like one of two dependencies, right? So this is how general dependencies we need to write. Next, if there are any risks which are involved in it, for example, it can be a budget risk. Okay, right? Budget, for example, we may have limited budget, or else it can be a technical risk, or else it can be an operational risk, or else it can be a regulatory risk, right? So these are the different key risks and issues which has to be addressed here. This is one more point. Now here, critical success factors. So what does mean by critical success factors? Critical success factors means what are the critical success factors we need to consider, right? For example, broadband connectivity, right? So this is what is for a key success indicator. Key success indicator is that reducing of billing time, because if your internet connection is fast, automatically billing time will be reduced, right? So that is there, right? What action steps? Make sure broadband connection must be good enough so that application will perform effective. Okay, this is what generally critical success factor. Next, identify the right cloud service provider. Okay, identify the right cloud service provider. Okay, so what? Yeah, so identify the right cloud service provider, for example. Okay, key success indicator is that effectiveness of application followed by the accuracy will be more. Okay, this is what generally key success indicators are. Next, action steps to assure success, right? What action steps make? uh, uh, effective choosing the right cloud service provider who can provide choosing the right cloud service provider who can provide the exact benefits of what we have chosen. Okay, this is version. So these are the critical success factors. Next, system interfaces and all everything. Okay, that because software development team will write it, right? So whoever are the software development team, they will write down that. Whoever the software development team, they will write down like what are the system interfaces and all technicalities, right? So let's not get into that. Okay. Now, as is system, as is the system, nothing but a regular traditional point of sale system. Whatever the traditional point of sale system we have. This diagram I'll show you in next session. Okay, how to prepare the diagram I'll show you next. Because how to prepare diagrams and all I will show you next. Okay, now I'm not writing anything here. So I'm not creating any diagram. Next in next session I'll tell you. So traditional point of sale system we have to, and here we need to update the steps because how the traditional POS system works that we have to mention. This is what generally we call it as is system. As is nothing but existing system or the current process flow which store owners are using. Next one about to be system. To be system nothing but the cloud-based point of sale system. Right. So cloud-based point of sale system we have to mention. And whatever the cloud-based point of sale system we are going to mention, that diagram we have to update here. At the same time, how that cloud-based POS system is being used, that process steps we have to be updated over here. Now, next is about gap analysis. What is meant by gap analysis? Gap analysis nothing but whatever the differences identified between as is and to be is called gap analysis. Okay, what is as is means? As is nothing but as is nothing but existing system. To be nothing but the proposed system. What is that we are going to develop? Okay. Right. So this is what generally the differences we see between as is and to be. Right. So this is where generally the gap analysis. Because if you see closely, just because of that we are developing cloud-based point of sale system doesn't mean we are completely changing the application because base level structure of the application, even though if it's a traditional management system, it remains intact. Okay, because the complete application won't be changed, right? Because basic functionalities of point of sale system is remains same. Either it can be a traditional point of sale system we are using, or else when we are going for cloud-based point of sale system, either way, end of the day, this is something essentially important because right. So that will be same. But there are some differences you may find, right? So maybe some kind of security features or some other features we may be added. Let's say, for example. So those we call it as gap analysis. That is what generally we call it as gap analysis stands for. So we need to mention the gap ID type. For example, let's say earlier it was only user ID password to give. Now we have identified a gap that two-step verification process. For example, user ID password we have given. After that, we have got a one-time password to our register mobile number. Okay. So unless until if you have not given that number, it won't be logged in, right? For example, this is for the additional security purpose. Am I right? Or, right? So security type, what kind of security type it is? For example, security functionality, right? So this is what the security functionality is, right? This is for close type, right? So closure type, open, right? So still it will open, right? So comments, gap name, adding additional security per login to the application. Okay, this is what a gap name. What kind of gap? Security functionality. Open comments. If there is any comments we'll write later. Okay, base rule. This is not related for the project because this template belongs to my old project. Okay, my old project. So this column belongs to that category. Okay, please ignore that. Comments. If there is any comments relating to the particular gap analysis over a period of time, may not be immediate, over a period of time, that will be mentioned under this comments here. So after the description of changes, for example, we want to make any changes in the description. Let's say we are making some changes in the description. For example, right? After over a period of right, this column is this is used after that, not immediately. For example, we have submitted the document BRD to the technical team. They are working. Now, for example, if there are any changes happened which was done by the customer. So those descriptions we have to mention followed by whoever has made the changes and when they have made the changes. Okay. So we do it later, not immediately, if it is needed. Next, end user types. Who are end user types? One is biller. Second is inventory person. Okay. Inventory person, for example, right? So these are the two, right? Impact description. Biller do product billing at the store. Okay. Next, what kind of stakeholder is this? He is an external stakeholder. Is an external stakeholder. Inventory person manage the products which are in inventory. Okay. Now, what kind of stakeholder is this? He is a external stakeholder. Okay. Now followed by this, for example, business requirement approval, right? So for example, approval, right? So when the business requirement document was approved, so that approval dates we have to be mentioned here. Understood everyone? Clear? So is it clear? Karan, Prajwal,
Yeah,
Pragati,
it is.
yeah,
Thank you.
Sapna, Sushma, everyone, clear?
Yes.
Mhm.
So this is how generally a business requirements document we have to prepare. Right? So this is how generally documentation of BRD is what we prepare. So after BRD document, the next is functional requirements and non-functional requirements. That information we have to update. That I'll show you tomorrow. Okay? Because not today. Tomorrow I will show you. Is it clear?